Everyone seems to believe the Jets will get the Kyle Connor contract done, but it's a question of when. Will they get it done before the start of the season? Let's chat about that on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
Your Locked On Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, we have a lot to chat about. The Kyle Connor contract remains one of the biggest outstanding questions this season, and it seems like, according to Murat Atesh of The Athletic, he does think the Jets will get this deal done, but maybe there's some debate on how long it is and for how much. We'll dive into that, maybe some of the implications of a term change and how the Jets could approach this and still come out on the winning side. And I also want to dive in a little bit into maybe trying to figure out what this year's Jets team, at least as of right now, is going to look like with their lineup on paper. It's, just a guess based on what they've done in the past and trying to take into account all sorts of different factors, some new arrivals and stuff. But I think we have a reasonable sense of what to expect this year. And I also want to kind of close out on a positive note because, whether the Jets do well or not this year, for me at least, doesn't feel as relevant to what I'm looking forward to. Really is this year being a year of growth. That's what I hope for the Jets. They've done growth in some ways in other areas, but there is still a transition to the future core that I am waiting for. And maybe this will be the year to start it. But before we dive into all the fun stuff, just wanted to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com, and you could win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Now, like I said, Murat Atesh was on Winnipeg Sports Talk earlier. He was chatting a little bit about some of the Jets offseason, kind of getting back up to speed. We have a lot of stuff happening now as we are starting to get closer to the start of the NHL season. We had some changes announced to the CBA and how the updates will work over the next several years. We also heard that, a couple of new things are going to affect over the next year or so, including the removal of double retention. There's going to be, of course, the change to next year's schedule where it'll be an earlier start to the regular season and a longer regular season by a couple of games. All sorts of fun stuff like that. Plus some kind of weird changes, right? So there's some peripheral impacts here for the Jets, of course, and every team will go through this. But, of course, the biggest thing for Winnipeg that, everyone's waiting for really is the Kyle Connor contract. This has been a little bit of a bugbear for the Jets, not because they don't think they can get it done, but I think the Jets, generally speaking, have been forced to play a waiting game. Kyle Connor's camp is not really in any rush to sign a long-term deal. It does kind of feel like when we hear that he's thinking about taking, stock of his options, it's not because he really wants to leave the Jets, but he's waiting to see how the market shakes out. And we've seen some buzz on Twitter that people are suggesting and maybe even thinking it's because Connor McDavid and, Kirill Kaprizov will set the market for the top forwards. Is Connor in that range of players? No. Right? We're not talking about franchise-level number one players on their team. But KFC is still one of the top performers on the squad, still one of the biggest offensive threats, so he's in the ballpark. And, as a guy who's going to be a really prime free agent candidate here next summer, obviously he has quite a bit of leverage. He could probably write his number on a check for most teams. Now, it's not going to be in the $14 million range. Nothing extravagant and insane like that. But 11, 12, 12 and a half, that seems very, very realistic. I think that's the range a lot of us have been looking at. But Murat kind of brought up an interesting point about the term. And this kind of goes along with Connor McDavid having been suggested as not looking to sign a long-term deal. McDavid apparently has thought about maybe doing a 3-year or a 4-year contract, which is very different than what we've seen with a lot of teams trying to lock up a lot of their star talent long term. This one is because McDavid wants to be sure that when he signs his next deal, that the Oilers actually give him a team that he feels he can win with. Now, there's some stuff around this that I have feelings on in particular. I to some degree, players calling the shots starts to get a little bit nervy for me. But when you're a guy like McDavid, you kind of get to do that to a degree. So it'll be interesting to see how all of that pans out for the Oilers. But for the Jets, I think the more important and interesting conversation is a 4 to 5 year kind of deal, which is what Marat suggested for Connor. And I think that term actually makes a lot of sense for both parties. Connor can maybe, get a big final UFA payday after, his deal expires here, and he's not locked in forever to the Jets if Winnipeg's direction starts to change over the next few years. On Winnipeg's side, they're not tied into a contract for a guy all the way to like age 33 or 34, and they can also trade him if things really start to take a downturn. Say in the next 2 years, the Jets hit a real bump in the road. A 4 to 5 year contract of Kyle Connor is a lot more movable than maybe a different deal where you're asking a team to take on another 5 to 6 years. And again, right, not that I think it would ever come to this, but if the Jets have to start having those conversations in a couple of seasons, maybe this kind of shorter term deal would be much more favorable. I'd certainly endorse that plan. If you have to re-sign Connor and you feel like you have to bring him back, then, make sure that you give yourself flexibility. I think at the end of the day, flexibility and roster movement is one of the best attributes and advantages a team can give itself. So we'll have to see how this all pans out. My feeling is Connor really can do whatever he wants. If he wants to stick around for the long term, he could probably name his price, and I feel the Jets would be close to just about meeting it. But if he's maybe a little more skeptical about the direction of the team, maybe he feels like things are not quite moving the direction he wants, and maybe he has some skepticism about how long this particular core is going to stay together, he has the choice to maybe take a shorter term. The Jets really are kind of on the wrong side of the leverage here. Connor kind of has the cards. And I don't think that he's going to do anything that puts the Jets in a really stressful position. But I'll say this, right? If Winnipeg can't sort this out by the start of the season, the countdown to not only the trade deadline, but the summer is going to be a very sweaty time for the Jets. Winnipeg is going to go by every day with him on their roster without a long-term extension in place, feeling like they are losing money and value on him. That's just the way it is. It's a business. And if they can't reach a deal before next summer, that would feel kind of grim. I think Winnipeg is not keen to allow this to happen. They've already seen it with Ehlers. Connor doesn't want out in the same way. He's always been given top billing and preference here. He's just trying to gauge the market, and his agent is going to try and squeeze out as much cash as humanly possible. It's the business side. It's how it works. But the longer that this kind of goes unsettled, the more nervous I would be that maybe at the end of this upcoming season, we have a very different conversation about him leaving. So, yeah, it's going to be a very interesting next few weeks as we get closer to the start of the season in October. This is going to be a growing conversation. And really, it's a conversation about the future of the Jets, too. A shorter-term deal, in my mind, would signal that maybe Winnipeg has some thoughts about how to retool on the fly and start preparing for the future core. So, a lot of questions to sort out. None of them are going to be easy, but the Jets have at least a little bit of time to sort through some of them as they narrow down what to do about the KFC contract. But amidst all of this, right, you're probably wondering, what the heck does Winnipeg's next year's squad even look like? I have some ideas as to what we might see coming into this year's Jets lineup, and we'll dive into that coming right up. But before we do, did want to let you know about our friends and partners at Monarch Money. Most people can't name all of their financial accounts or even what they're worth. Whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments, it's hard to keep track of everything. And when you don't have the full picture, you can leave money on the table. That's why Monarch Money is here to help. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface, either on your laptop or your phone. Monarch is made to help you for those who have really busy lives, which Listen, that's probably everyone, right? Unless you're retired, you are probably running around and you've got a ton of work to do. So you need something that can pull all of your finances in one place and do the heavy lifting for you. Monarch Money does exactly that, providing you data visuals, smart categorization of your spending, and it even helps you set goals. If you've got a partner or spouse, it can even help you with a shared account that allows you to stay on track and on the same page with your partner or spouse at all times. You can set goals together. You can help track your spending habits, figure out what streaming services maybe you should cut to save a little bit of money, and figure out your long-term financial future. So don't let financial opportunities slip through your fingers. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNHL. Hey, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Friends, if you can believe it, we are really just a few weeks away before preseason starts, and not long after that, the start of the regular season. And it feels like this year's Jets team is a little hard to figure out. Not because there's some crazy amount of stuff that's changed, and the Jets are this mysterious organization. No one understands them. No one knows what this team's going to be like. But we have a lot of new players, and I think more new faces than maybe people are sort of acknowledging. And it's going to have some major up and downstream impacts on how this team matches up, how it's organized, and ultimately how the team performs both in the regular season and the playoffs. I don't worry so much about the regular season version of this team. I think the Jets will still be pretty good. I think they'll probably be at least a 100-point team. How much further beyond that, we have to kind of wait and see. I think that's going to depend on the power play and Hellebuck, again, having a really strong start. But let's try and talk through some of the start of the season lines. Now, this is absent of any major acquisitions, any big trades, and one of the biggest question marks here is Adam Lowry. Lowry was supposed to miss a good portion of the start of the season, not like like the whole start of the season, but at least a couple of weeks, if I recall correctly, was expected to be his rehab portion. But he was recently cited at practice and starting to get on his skates again. Now, granted, these are just some drills. He's not really doing full contact scrimmages and stuff, but maybe he's on track to be back a little sooner than expected. So keep an eye out for that. Lowry really is one of our most important players. I've always felt like, I was wrong about him and what he could do for this Jets team, especially as they've continued to really truck along with this core. He's grown to be such a leader on the ice and in the locker room, and not having him, I think, is going to be noticeable for the start of the season. So that leaves the Jets with a top line that's probably going to be the same. CSV, my thoughts on it. I will say last year it was a lot better, right? It was a lot closer to average or above average, which compared to what it was before is a huge improvement. Still, compared to other top lines, it's still behind the eight ball, right? If we look at a lot of the other teams' best lines and what they do to opposing competition, this trio doesn't dominate in the same way, but they still have enough skill to where they can be a real problem. Now, where the changes might start get interesting is the second line, right? This middle six really as a whole has some opportunity for some adjustments. And the first thing that I think we have to figure out is who's going to be the 2C. Now, I've talked about the Jets maybe sort of showing their hand and tipping their hand that it's going to be Taves, but Taves also hasn't played in 2 years. We really don't know if he can actually handle the sort of responsibilities that a 2C would be asked to do. What the Jets do know is that they've got Vlad Namestnikov. And look, I can tell you till I'm blue in the face that he's really a little too defensively minded and not a guy that I think the 2C role is necessarily the best fit for. But I think if you have to make a decision, you probably want to go with what you're at least relatively comfortable with. And Namestnikov as your 2C gives Taves a little more time to get up to speed. It allows him to acclimate to the NHL. Again, after having a couple of years off, he's still getting his body in shape. He can say that he's feeling strong and good, but until he gets into the game, and he'd probably be the first to tell you this, that game action's just a different level of involvement, and certainly a level of preparedness that he probably doesn't yet have. It's going to take him some time to ramp up. So I would expect to some degree to see some of his minutes limited, which could also mean that if they do try to put him on the second line, that maybe it actually becomes their de facto third line. The Jets have done this in the past where the Lowry line really was your two line. They tend to like split these two relatively evenly, but maybe with Taves having some issues early, if that happens, they're going to try and draw back that time. So you could see Perfetti, Taves, and probably Nyquist on your second line, either Taves or Nemesnikov. Your third line, I don't really expect too much to be super different here. You're going to have Niederreiter, Nemesnikov, or Taves, and then probably one of Chibrikov or Iafallo. I continue to think that one of the Jets rookies is going to make the team. Now, I see some people saying, Chibrikov will start on the fourth. I don't think that's the case. I think if Chibrikov does make the team, it would be to play in your top nine. He's got a little too much skill to be a fourth line grinder. He also does have some maybe his defensive lapses, could be an issue in some capacities, but I think if you're looking at him as a guy who can bring some finishing talent to your middle six, Chibrikov makes a lot of sense. If he doesn't make the top nine, I start to wonder, the offensive potential of this group, because it's already going to be down finishing talent in Ehlers. Nyquist can shoot the puck pretty well, but I don't know what his game's going to be like. It's definitely been in decline the last few years. And so, what he does with either Taves or Nemesnikov and Perfetti, it's harder to guess. And it also is kind of absent of whatever Lambert does. Brad is still, to me, a huge X factor. I saw somebody leave some sort of weird comment saying, I was saying he was the answer to Winnipeg's offensive problems, and talking about, comparing him to like the Fabian Lysell hype from Bruins fans. First off, they're not comparable prospects. Lysell was always a middle six guy. Lambert very clearly has the tools of a top six player. I just don't know about the IQ and decision-making, right? I think he can be a brilliant player, and I think he's shown that in other leagues. He's not a perimeter player. He's never been. He already posted a 55-point season in his first full year with the Moose, so I'm not really worried about him. I just don't know how it all translates to the NHL level. I think he'll be a good complementary player, but I don't know if he'd even make it out of camp this year. So there's a lot of big questions about this middle six group, and Chibrikov feels like the only one to me that's probably got an inside track to the Jets. Lambert, if he does make it, would be a very intriguing thing to watch. His performance last year in a limited stint was okay. It wasn't great. And so I just don't know what an offseason of development and this new Jets team is going to mean for him, right? Because he's probably going to play as a winger at the NHL level. Unless Taves really isn't good enough to go and can't play, maybe he drops in at center again. I really don't know. This is one of those situations where we actually have way more uncertainty than I've seen from other years. So, this is going to be a very funky thing to figure out. I think preseason is going to be super telling. We have to watch how Taves performs there. Can he keep up? Can he get his feet up to speed? It's going to be a huge problem if he's not ready to go, because honestly, I think the Jets are putting a lot in his basket. Now, I've said before that I feel like this year the Jets are not investing a ton so far into this roster, giving themselves some flexibility to see what shakes out and see how this current group as is performs before they make a big commitment. But, if Taves already has issues early and can't go, and you're already missing Lowry, Winnipeg might be forced to call upon reinforcements a lot sooner than expected. So that's a very interesting thing. Keep an eye out for that. But I think for the most part, we'll see a similar middle six and really top nine overall to what we had last year, just with the caveats that you're replacing Ehlers with Nyquist, and your center situation is going to be a bit tricky. Again, also considering Chibrikov may make this middle six as well. The fourth line, I would expect to see something like Barron, maybe Gus, maybe Koepka or Pearson. You don't have enough roster spots for everyone, and I feel like Gus is always the odd man out, so I wouldn't be shocked if the fourth line is actually something like Koepka, Barron, and Pearson. I feel like that's kind of a step back in some ways. We'll have to see what Pearson's like. Tanner used to be fantastic. I used to really love watching him with the Kings. Time has not been kind to him, though. So can he keep up? Can he continue to be, maybe a more impactful forward against softer competition? He's got a lot of championship experience and pedigree, so that's kind of what I'm hoping for. He can also still shoot the puck really well. There's zero question that he does that. Again, kind of like Nyquist and Taves, though, the speed might be a bit of a concern heading into the season. As far as the Jets defense are concerned, this is probably the easiest part. Morrissey, DeMello, Sandberg, Pionk, and who knows on the third pairing. Just pick a number out of a hat for the remaining defenders, and other than Hanela, you've probably got yourself a third pairing combo that you're going to see this year. So I'm not even going to worry about that. But as long as the top four remains as is, I think you still have a pretty strong arrangement. And of course, never a question who's in goal. That's always going to be the same. So curious to know how you feel about this Jets lineup. Do you like it? Do you feel like it's going to be decent? Again, I think for the regular season, it'll be fine. For the playoffs, though, the Jets definitely need at least a couple of pieces, and I don't think that that's going to happen externally. Kind of leads me into our next topic. What am I looking forward to this season? And this is where I feel like me talking about maybe this being the transition year that I've long looked for could be something really exciting for Winnipeg fans. I want to chat about that in just a moment, but before we do, speaking of excitement, the NFL season is here, and FanDuel is here to help you make the most of it. The NFL season is just around the corner, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Opening night is tomorrow night, so this is a great chance for you to get in on the action very early. Maybe you think you know who the MVP of the season is going to be. Maybe you've got your Super Bowl picks already picked out, and you have an NFL champion of the world already selected. A little bit of a joke. Champion of the world for the NFL feels a little self-serving, but you know what? FanDuel wants to make sure that you win big anyways. Again, just a $5 bet, and if it's your first bet and it wins, $300 in bonus bets to keep on rolling those victories in. It's quick, it's easy, and it's the best way to add a little energy to your Sundays. So, are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, thank you so much for rejoining us in tonight's episode as we are chatting a little bit about, listen, this season's going to be weird. I've probably been a little bit sour on the offseason as a whole, but I think that there's a couple of things that I'm really excited to see for the Jets this year. The first thing that I am really looking forward to is an increased role and chance for the youth. We haven't really had that in a while. The Jets keep locking spots to roster veterans. I think this is the first offseason where there might legitimately be more camp competition and an actual chance for a rookie or two to make the team. Now, again, we know how Winnipeg is. We know how Arniel is. But I've watched how he's tried to treat Cole Perfetti the last year or so, and it makes me encouraged that maybe there's a chance for a young player to really step up and have a big camp. If they can't cut it and they really don't do enough in camp to make the decision inarguable, well, you've got some veterans who can sub in, who have had plenty of experience in the NHL, and will probably do a job for you, right? But my hope is that, either one of Chipperkov or Lambert, or if possible, both, really do enough to get a look for this year's starting 12, so to speak. Now, again, I don't anticipate more than one rookie getting an opening night lineup spot. But if Lambert can really break the mold and, help Chipperkov out, I think that would be the best outcome. Again, I think Chipperkov right now is the one who has the inside track. He looked very comfortable at the NHL level. He looked like a pesky middle six guy who can clearly shoot the puck very well. That we knew from his Moose days, and that looks like it translates to the NHL level too, maybe in a bit of a Logan Stankoven-y kind of way. Or maybe Seth Jarvis is more of the closer comparison, even if Jarvis is right now, of course, the better player overall. But, maybe Chipperkov can kind of do something like that. Like I said, though, Lambert for me is the X factor. We don't know how he's going to be. And if he can help move guys like Nyquist more into your bottom six and give your top six a real top 6 second line that gives the Jets a lot more offensive jump and skill, that's really the best outcome. I think anything that can give the first line a real second line backing with some high end offensive skill, some great transition play, all that stuff would be really helpful. The Jets kind of had it last year, although inconsistently and in spurts. If they get it this year, it'll be more in the second half of the season. I think it's going to take time for this lineup to really gel. I think if the rookies do make it, it's also going to take time for them to really acclimate. Brad especially has, a much longer way to go in some ways. Chibrikov, I kind of think what he is what he is, and his growth will be relatively quick. I think he'll be, a fairly consistent kind of player. But other than that, maybe you also watch the Moose a little bit. Keep an eye out for them, right? Barlow, I think, will probably be on the team this year. Of course, Salamonson is coming back and should be fantastic. Braden Yeager, though, is maybe the triple X factor, if you will. A super secret guy to keep a close eye on, especially in the second half of the year. As wear and tear starts to build up and maybe the Jets have an injury or two, Yeager, by that point, may have had a really successful start to his AHL career. If he does well enough and looks really impressive, listen, I don't want to overhype him and oversell this prospect pool, but I think there's a reason that he's shot up to be one of my biggest secret weapons and a guy that I think could play a couple of games this year, maybe one or two. I'm very excited about him. I think he already has a lot of defensive two-way maturity, and he'll be joined by quite a bit of talent with the Moose. No need to rush him, but if you're the Jets, you're looking at this team, and you really want to start preparing for the second evolution of the score, getting your guys to pro readiness and pro status quickly, and getting them more integrated to this team to give you cap space to spend in other spots, I think could be a fantastic way to get back to what made the 2017-2018 team really successful. You're not going to win in free agency the usual way. The trade market's going to be harder. You have drafted a lot of really interesting and talented kids. Yeager obviously was exchanged from the Rucker deal, but he kind of still fits into the category-ish, if you want to put it that way. And I think that he could be alongside Lambert and Chibrikov and guys like that, part of a future backbone that gives you some real oomph. So for me, this most important thing this season, show that transition, show that growth, get yourself prepared for what this next generation of Jets hockey looks like. I think this could be the year to start that. I'm kind of excited for that reason for it, even if we may have some temporary pain on the ice. But I think the future for this team could be super, super interesting. So keep an eye out for that. Let me know what you're looking forward to this season. Hockey is right around the corner. We'll be talking about it all the way through. Don't forget, next week we're starting back to our daily schedule. I will try to have as much as I can. Just know that my September is going to be a lot of work, travel, and stuff, so my posting schedule may be a little bit up and down late in the evenings. We'll have to see, but hopefully you will have lots to talk about and get acquainted with as we get closer to the start of the Jets season. But for tonight's episode, that's going to be all the time that we have. I'm excited for next year. I hope you are too. We'll see you soon. Have a great night. And as always, go Jets, go.